I suppose I better introduce myself. I'm Alice Kelly Purnell. I'm a bit of a polymath. I'm 70 now, and it's quite interesting because I've always thought I'd die young. I have been going through a process during the last 18 months of thinking it was going to happen pretty soon. But mind you, I'm 70 now and I'm determined not to die young. So hopefully there's some years ahead. My sort of life story, I worked in all sorts of areas, but the jobs or professions that I enjoyed most were nursing and counselling psychology. I got an OBE on the basis of my counselling work. But in my work, the creativity I used was with touching, with healing, with helping, with listening. But my own life, of course, has been complicated like many people's lives, and one way I've expressed that is through music. I love singing. I used to be in Brighton Consort, early music, and I love jazz. But anyway, I started writing poetry. The first poem I wrote really was a sort of therapy. My dad had died, and I'll read that poem in a while. But I had it in my head that I was no good at language, no good at English, because at school, when I was a small kid, sort of 8, 9, 10, my spelling was individual, shall we say, and I was told, no, you go in the direction of science. So I went in the direction of science, got a science degree, and had felt that yes, I can write technical stuff, but I'm sure nobody'd ever want to read anything I wrote because of the spelling mistakes. I disguised the spelling mistakes by having appalling writing, exacerbated because it was italics script. A collapsed italic script looks like a spider's on a trip, and my handwriting was bad. Anyway, somebody said you should get a computer, and I was very much against that because I'm a born-again Victorian, really. Anyway, I finally got one, and it's much easier to write when you can do the corrections on the computer without having to rewrite the whole thing by hand. So I read this poem, Dad is Dead, at one of the folk clubs, because I used to go to the Lewis Arms, the Laughing Fish at Isfield, the Elephant, the Dormer Castle, and there were sing-arounds, and I'd sing. I've got a good alto voice. I can't ever remember words. I should explain that, because when I was 15, I was gassed accidentally in France with carbon monoxide poisoning, and my heart stopped for 5 minutes, which is probably where I get the idea I'd die young. And as a result, it affected my memory rather badly. I've still got a reasonable IQ, but I cannot remember words unless I've got them in front of me, which has always been a drawback as a performer, because when you perform, you need to be able to look at your audience and not be reading from a script like this. So anyway, at this pub, I'd shown my poem to a friend, and she said, "That's really good, you should read it." And I was very reluctant, and I said, "Well, okay, I will." And I asked the MC, "Is it okay if instead of singing I read this poem?" Rather tentatively and kindly he said yes. So I read it. So shall I read it now? I think I will. My dad and mum divorced, and it was very acrimonious and horrible. I took his side. He was a dear man. Slightly eccentric as well, but still. So my very first poem was about losing your dad. And it's called Dad is Dead. I'll put this down. Dad is dead. It's time to clear his flat, to go through his private life in boxes, to reduce his loneliness to things in the place where he died. We daughters were there. He was carried from there as we carry his things, reverently, carefully away from this place of death. Pictures off walls, marked by empty spaces now, bed stripped, plastic undersheet on the open to air and stale. Curtains drawn, phone engaged, but nobody there. His books out of date, once prized, yet useless. His clothes stained with tobacco burns for the bin or Oxfam. Old pipes, slippers, useless bits and pieces. Relatives hoped for some memory of him, but angered, disgracing the death, quarrelled, discussing the disagreeable interpretation of a badly drawn up will, its complex codicils. Sad he never realised what was important to each of us. Old letters written to him from before I was born, kept in a box with other papers, private thoughts to burn or keep. Old bills and new ones keep coming through the door to pay. Read the meters, cut the gas, water, electricity and phone. Photos of people I don't know, unlabelled in old albums, of his youth at university, uniformed in the Royal Artillery, poignant glimpses of his time before me. Is there a key in his life or death as to who I am? I have some of his features. We enjoyed music. He had his 78s and I'm not yet into CDs. Both old-fashioned. The clock has stopped. Dad is dead. Middle age hits me and I miss him, angry at his expected, untimely, untidy passing. I recall the slime coming from his dead mouth before they took him. How cold and unapproachable he was in death. He understood me, and I did him. I've not cried yet. My dear old Dad. Anyway, 3 or 4 people said, can I have a copy? And I hadn't thought anybody'd be interested, so I promised that I'd take some printouts of, and I gave them to them. Anyway, as time went by, I had various relationships, and because I'm divorced and I'm a lesbian, and each time some woman left me, I was broken-hearted, and I just didn't know what to do. So I wrote as a kind of a therapy, and the first poems I, again, written as therapy, were about the sadness of the loss of a relationships. Also, there were some that I wrote that felt quite joyful, and so I'll try and find one of those from my book. Incidentally, I've published this marvellous compilation called Be the Flame, Not the Moth. The title comes from the idea that a moth is drawn to the light, and I'm drawn to the light of love and beauty. And unfortunately the light burns you sometimes, the moths die, and so the principle is it's better to be the flame, the attractor, rather than the attracted. And this book is a compilation of poems. It's not all sadness and badness. When I was happy, I tended to write funny things, and I've got a slightly rude sense of humour, perhaps, I'm told. It's all perfectly innocent. But we used to go on Wednesdays to the Walmer Castle when they had poetry nights, and I realised quite quickly that you cannot read or recite a poem that is serious in a pub full of chaps full of beer. All they'd listen to was something that was slightly risky and preferably rather funny, and the only way one could get attention was by writing funny poems. And so you know, I have a sense of humour like most of us. So I wrote some funny ones. Yeah, one of the poems that I wrote, I had gone years back to visit a friend, Claire, who lived on Chichester Canal in a canal boat, and she liked smoking wacky-backy. I tried it, but it had no effect on me whatsoever. Anyway, we were talking about how women and men don't really understand each other, and very often there are difficulties, shall we say. And I wrote this poem called Clones, so let's see if I can find it. Oh, yes, here we are. Clones. He's ambiguous, she's exiguous. He's ambivalent, she's equivalent. He's androgynous, she's erogenous. Zones. He's collectible. She's delectable. She's incredible. He's just edible. She's glamorous. He's quite amorous. Moans. He's masculine. She's feminine. He's virile. She's fertile. He's virulent. She's flatulent. Drones. He's physical. She's quizzical. She's stripping. He's flipping. She's ready. He's heady. Groans. He's mounting. She's counting. He's coming. She's humming. He's gyrating. She's vibrating. Clones. He's crude. She's nude. He's quaking. She's faking. He's died. She's lied. Bones. Sad that. I hope you enjoyed it anyway. So that sort of poem, the funny ones, gets people's attention much quicker than any, and you know, I embarrass some people with them. A sweet friend Sandra says, you know, you really can't read your rude poem at my evenings, because some people might find them a bit difficult to cope with. Anyway, I'm fearless now that I'm 70, and I read what I please, and hopefully people do enjoy it. And it's best to have a balance. I suppose where I'm at today is probably quite well expressed in a poem called The Dragonfly. It's a mixture of poetry and prose, and I'm looking for it as I'm here we are, yeah. And I'll try and pitch it properly with a bit of a preamble. It was an October afternoon, sunshine between showers. The algae-encrusted chalk rubble was bound together with brambles. Rain-washed blackberries glowed in the sunlight, and wild elderberries and rose hips reminded me of homemade wines and jams. A large green dragonfly alighted on a stone near my hand, unaware that I watched her while I searched for fossils. As her wings quivered in the waning light, it reminded me of an afternoon spent by a lake in Hampstead, a time when I felt very alone, very down in the dumps. It reminded me of when such a dragonfly climbed on to a reed stem out of the water, dragging her cocoon behind her. I placed my finger above her, and she climbed onto it, and now finally, releasing herself from her aquatic past life, her crumpled wing buds were draped along her slender back. I marvelled at the urgent way her lifeblood force filled them, visibly growing, extending, until they reached her long tail's ending. One by one, her wings moved gently from her sides, unfurled and dried, wings which, though transparent, released rainbow patterns which danced as they quivered and trembled, their excitement of form and growing strength. She was testing them as they hardened and gained their full extent. This done, she seemed somehow heavier and more formidable, but this dragonfly remained on my hand, so still, until she was satisfied all was right. How did she know? Who taught her to fly? Her metamorphosis, her life almost complete, how didn't she feel fearful or joyful or amazed? Still and silently I watched this little miracle. The extraordinary is mundane in nature. Remember, you only need to take time to see, to experience, to be a part of it, to really be. Time moved slowly by, and she walked to my fingertip and started to fly. Her iridescent emerald body flashed above the cabin calm pool's water, wherein she'd spent the largest and first part of her life. The flight's freedom was meant to be, was her destiny. She'd not realised I'd shared that critical time with her. No bird had preyed on her, and now she was gone, searching for a mate. My mood was changed utterly. She taught me something about moving on, about freedom, about beauty and wonder, about learning to stop and truly experience something, not to rush, to feel the warmth of the sun, extending, growing and trusting in a future, about life force. And now, years on, another dragonfly is also close to me, with those so large compound eyes and the wonderful jewelled wings, the dragonfly. I found in my life the greatest joys, almost the prayer of life, comes through nature, not through religion. I was brought up as a Catholic, but more and more I've felt contact with the earth is something that all the religions, perhaps save the Buddhists, don't really appreciate, don't really reinforce. Our lives are supposed to be a preparation for life after death with many religions, but I think it's important to really be alive in this beautiful world, and to enjoy the world as it is, to be in contact, to be earthed. And so I got quite involved in kind of earth magic. I never was a fully fledged membership hippie, but I'm certainly into Gaia principle as part of who I am, and I'm certainly in love with Sussex. I think this is the Grand County. I'm actually somebody who was born in Hammersmith, a Londoner, but I've lived in Sussex now. I'm 70, that's 64 years, and people are beginning to speak to me now, so that's something. And when I was fit, I used to love walking, and of course through geology I've been very deeply involved with landscape and countryside. I'd have loved to have studied, and there's never been time to study everything, but I'd have loved to have studied botany. But wild things are just so marvellous. When I was at a prep school, I was abused sexually and physically, and it was horrible. And I ran away, determined to kill myself. And there was a lake near the school, and I thought, well, I'll drown myself. I'd seen the film where the knights riding across the ice fall through the ice, and it closes over them, and they're all drowned. Their armour drowns, carries them down into the deep water, and so Mother Russia was saved from the Polish knights. So this image was in my head, and I thought, I cannot bear this. I'm so homesick, and I hate this place, and I want to die. And it had been snowing and it was freezing cold, so I ran into the middle of this lake. It was covered in ice, and I jumped up and down, and yes, the ice broke, and I found I was standing in 18 inches of stinking cold muddy water, and that was horrible. And of course you can't drown yourself very easily in water that's very shallow. So I spent ages leaping about on this lake trying to drown myself, and I was howling like a banshee, and I was only 10, something like that. And I gave up in the end, and I thought, I can't even get that right. And on the bank I was sitting and sort of swaying and really upset, and I saw tracks in the snow. There were little sort of three-fingery tracks with a spur behind. I thought, those are bird tracks where they've hopped along. And then I saw some dashes in the snow, and I thought, what the hell's that? And I followed them, and they stopped in a snowdrift. And I thought, well, whatever it is, it's not a bird. What would make dashes in the snow? Something that flew away? It must be in the snow. So I pushed my hands into the snow and touched with my fingers this tiny little furry thing, and it was a baby rabbit, wild rabbit, and it was almost dead with cold. And I held this close to me and rocked, and my body warmth seemed to bring it round and gave it life. And I took it to a place where I knew there were some rabbit burrows, and I could see one that was open. I popped this little chap near it, and it hopped into the burrow and presumably was alive. And that gave me enough courage to go back to get yet another beating. So in a sense, little wild rabbit gave me hope. So I am absolutely obsessed with wildness. And if you're disabled, which I am now thanks to osteoarthritis, getting around isn't that easy, getting in touch with nature. But I've written a number of nature poems. I haven't written about that incident, maybe I should write about it. Certainly one thing that struck me as being terribly, terribly sad, I'm sorry it's sad, called On the Beach. I'll see if I can find it. Oh dear. Page 108, yeah. Now, this is quite a true story. It happened very many years ago when I was extremely young. It was between Kemp Town and Rottingdean on the seashore. On the beach I found her, a great grey body stranded. Seagulls had pecked at her skin. Her eye moved when I drew near. She was alive when I found her. A sea goddess had landed. Barnacles encrusted her skin, her body scarred by a great fight. I took water in my hands to bathe her poor face, sanded and bleached. She'd striven to free herself as the tide had left her there. Her eye watched me as I tried so hard to keep her body cool as it dried out in that unfamiliar sunshine. Skin cracked, this air breather overheats and dies on land. Her dark eye and my eyes met, hers from deep acceptance glazed. Helpless, I watched her as she died. I could not turn that so slow tide. Alone I couldn't lift her, Leviathan, back to the oceans where she dwelt. She'd roamed 3/4 of the globe, the surfaces and deeps of the ocean. Now she was lying dead and stinking in the sun. It's really awful when you can do nothing. But feeling her eye and my eye meeting was a holy moment. Moments like that in life have meant so much to me, and they're moments that took a second. I remember I used to go to Chanctonbury Ring to watch the May Day dawn and the Morris dancing at midnight on May Day Eve, and slept under the stars with a group of friends. I always woke up first because I'm a terribly light sleeper, and on this particular occasion I think there were 4 or 5 of us, and we watched the Morris dancing, and it had been a beautiful night, and of course the sun comes up at about 4:45, really, really early. The beginning, the dawn chorus then begins, and I woke up and everybody else was sleeping, and so as soon as I woke up, my dog woke up, dear old Oliver, and he and I went for a little walk, largely because I needed to pee, and we walked down the Southdown Way, and would you believe, there was a stag just standing there, a few yards from us, and the dog sat down beside me. He was surprised, and I just stood, and the stag just stood, and we spent a few seconds just looking at each other, as if he was looking at me as if to say, what the bloody hell are you doing here at this time of day? And I was looking at him and thinking, you are so beautiful, this beautiful stag. And a moment like that is really special. Anyway, yeah, I've written about Chanctonbury. Chanctonbury's been quite a significant place for me. So let's see if I can find that one. In my book, I've divided there's an index which is alphabetical, and there's also an index which divides the poems into types, you know, humour and landscape and all that sort of thing. And because of my rotten memory, I sometimes have to revert to that to find the things. Anyway, let's see if I can find Chanctonbury one. Talking about moments in nature which stick in one's mind, and about the stag on Chanctonbury Ring. So I wrote a poem about another occasion on Chanctonbury Ring called Reliving May Day on Chanctonbury. and it's a Sussex poem. Before the sun has risen, birds start to sing. Buds begin to open and leaves cast eastwards. A hint of red outlines the easterly landscape, white haw blossom pinked by the glow. It grows yellow by sun ascendant in the sky. Insolent almost, 4 town-bred girls' faces see, marvel at its rising, just on time as ever. Mysterious woods unshadowed behind them, accessed by its light and warmness, promising summer. Heat radiates away the dawn dew of May. Frisians stir, sway, stand and sticky lick my car, taking in the night's pure droplets on long pink tongues. Sleeping still, the wheels recoloured by daylight. Streetlights still on, show town in country, where man is unaware of May Day morning. Morris men morrised, and moved on after midnight. Bells jingled jangling up and down the hillside. A march of time, timeless, a dance to summer. Winter done, washed down with real Harvey's ale. All left, leaving only 4 women to sleep under the stars. She put daisies in my hair, like a Judas kiss. A good act, betraying poison, poised in my memory. But May's a time of change. The May Queen's crowned. The fool and the dragon leap and dance around. Old folks remember times gone by and sing the old song. Walk winnikins forever, young lovers. Walk the ring round. Rings on fingers to forget. Dawn brings a new day. Another lover? I think I'll leave it there, actually. Yes, I wrote another Sussex poem which I particularly like. At Lillington there's a tiny, tiny church, and I went with the woman I loved at that time to visit the church, and well, basically for a day out in darling old Sussex, and I wrote this poem, if I can find it. Here we are, Sussex Flint Church. So this is about Lillington. I do like the flint buildings, the natural buildings in Sussex, and of course they're all now, people are buying up old barns and converting them into £2 million houses, and they've completely changed what a flint building means. However, this was written before there was all that money around in the 70s and 80s, and farm buildings became twee houses. So, Sussex Flint Church. Sussex Flint Church shrunk with passing time. Congregation dwindled, graveyard full, a quiet place. Oaks and yew trees encircle it, untidy hedges are its walls. No grave is recent, no bouquets, but wildflowers grow here. The door's unlocked. We go through, 1 service a month. There are few visitors. Inside it's whitewashed, has patches of green damp, smells of mould, wood-wormed timbers and cold stone. Light filters through dirty, clear glass windows, some cracked, rays of warmth in this catacomb cold. We walk there like pilgrims, stand alone, or wander like moths whispering in wonder at the work of centuries, time capsuled here, in this once central, now edge of the village building. A simple cross at the altar, colour given by week old flowers in Norman arch frame focus. The floor lay, gravestone lined, forgotten beneath our feet, over the bones of the squires and villagers. Together in this, the smallest church in Sussex, alive in this redundant place. At that moment it was ours. We signed the book. The last wedding had been 2 years before. I felt the warmth of her skin, smelt her perfume. Her presence there delighted me. I felt happy and at ease, until I saw her face show boredom. Outside again, on a tumulus tump, in the graveyard where the Christian church stood against its druidic predecessor, she said she had sensed the history of this holy place. I crossed the boneyard and felt the cold shadow of another walk over my grave, felt the fear of losing our love. I saw distraction in her forehead and saw her smile had gone. In spirit, she was with someone else. Long after we've parted and died, this little church will witness the coming and going of lovers, of life and death, and wildflowers will surely grow again each spring in the burial ground. Sussex Flint Church. So you can tell I was sad when I wrote that. Oh dear. I'll get on to something different. My first career was in research chemistry, and then I helped my dad by running his restaurant, and then I went into nursing, and I met various other people. I went into nursing, I suppose, in my mid-30s. A friend of mine also had trained as a nurse, but much earlier, and this is based on a true story. I won't name her, but it always amuses me. This really happened when she was a student nurse in London. It's called Student Nurse. Oh yeah, I should point out TLC means tender loving care, which means you don't intervene if somebody's dying other than keep them comfortable. You don't try to resuscitate them. So, student nurse. First night nerves on her first night duty, in charge of a chronic geriatric ward, 24 beds. Nobody'd said break a leg. It's a different sort of theatre. There was a tough, parrot-nosed sister in charge, roving to supervise 2 wards and their student nurse night watchers. Not enough trained staff to be there all through the night. When starting duty, there's a report. The previous shift records developments, things to watch, danger areas, duties, and patients with special requirements. Pay particular attention to Mr. Mason in bed 9 in the corner. He's very ill, 97, very frail. All his systems are failing. He's just for TLC. When his breathing gets irregular and laboured, it means he's expected to die very soon. So pull the curtains and call sister. Don't try to resuscitate. At about 4 in the morning, sure enough from bed 9, there was a gasping, terrible, irregular breathing. Quietly the nurse closed the curtains and got sister. "It's Mr. Mason. He's going," she whispered. Sister went behind the curtains and quickly returned. "He's not going. He's coming. He's masturbating." A nurse who doesn't know the difference between coming and going really has a few things to learn. I do love the fact that old people still have sexual urges. Why the hell shouldn't they? When I was matron of Charlesworth Nursing Home, I came in for my duty, and the night staff looked horrified. They said, "Matron, it's terrible. It's really terrible. It's Bill." And I thought, oh dear old Bill. Now Bill was an old soldier. He'd fought in the Great War and in the Irish independence battles in the 20s. He was standing by my desk to attention as though he was on a report, on a charge, before his commanding officer, like this, you know. And I said, "What's the trouble, Bill?" He said, "Party was willing," and sort of looked at the ceiling. I said, "Well, what's happened?" And the night sister said, "Well, it's Bill. He spent the night with Amy in her bed." And so I slipped out of my office and went to see Amy, and she was sitting up in bed, a little pink-faced and dishevelled. And I said, "I gather Bill spent the night with you." "Yes, he did," she said. "It was nice." "Oh, well, that's all right." And I went back into the office, and I gave the staff a good bollocking. You know, why the hell shouldn't Bill spend the night with Amy if the party was willing? And so I was quite astonished that, you know, relatively sensible people found it disgusting that this couple of consenting adults had spent the night together. She wasn't going to get pregnant. She was 70-something. Good luck to them. So, anyway, I got a reputation for being slightly unconventional matron. I I convinced the GPs that it was not a good idea to sedate everybody so that they were zombies all day, and I got them to change from night sedation, Mogadon and Valium for everybody, to giving them a glass of port. They slept much better, and in the morning they were much more cheerful, and port, or a Guinness if they preferred it, gave them a little bit of iron, so it was much better, and it saved the NHS a lot of money. And in my drugs round, I was giving it, as well as medications, I was giving people a little something to help them sleep and perk them up. Oh yes, this isn't really poetry, but this is something I'm writing my biography at the moment. One of the ladies that I looked after, Eleanor, had been working in a munitions factory, and there'd been a terrible explosion, and she'd suffered burns and lost her leg and was wheelchair bound. And I noticed that just before lunch she was always rubbing the palm of her hand. Now the palm of her hand was quite smooth and a different colour to the rest of her hand. It didn't have a handprint, and in fact I realised pretty quickly it was a wound site, an area where she'd had a patch of skin because she'd burnt her hand, and I knew she had an abdominal scar where they'd taken the skin from to graft onto her palm. So I said to her, Eleanor, Ellie, you're hungry, aren't you? And she said, how do you know, matron? I said, well, you're rubbing the skin from your tummy that's on your hand. And she roared with laughter. But it gave me an idea. She suffered terribly from phantom pain. The leg that had gone hurt like hell, and she was always asking for medication. And I said, well, I've got an idea, Eleanor. I'll get you a special pill. And she said, what do you mean, matron? And I said, well, you'll see. So I got a glass of water and a medicine pot, and I said, look, your leg that's gone really hurts you, doesn't it? Yeah, she said, yeah, it really fucking hurts. And I said, well, look, you can't see it, it's invisible, isn't it? Yes, she said. And I said, well, I have got an invisible pill for you. She looked at me as if I was balmy. And I said, yeah, this will work, it'll work in 5 minutes. And so very suspiciously she put her hand out. I tipped the medicine pot with nothing in it. I said, well, take it. So she took it and took a drink of water and said, the pain will have gone in 5 minutes. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, she said, it worked. And would you believe, any time she got a phantom pain after that, she asked my staff or me, can I have one of matron's magic pills? And so that we did. The power of the mind is quite astonishing, and I do think it's a great shame in life generally, but in nursing in particular, we don't spend enough time helping people think through or past their pain or problems. We don't touch each other enough. I found that when I was nursing, I put a tremendous amount of emotional support to the people I was caring for, and well, I suppose the only word to use is I loved them, particularly the very old. And there were moments in my nursing career which were very special, and I think this happens whoever you are and wherever you work, whatever you do. There are particular people and particular things that are poignant. I got a reputation because of working as a counselling psychologist, and I suppose because of being a matron, and because I was getting old. People tended to turn for me for advice quite often, and I'm no expert in helping people through finding a new mate, but I remember a friend, I probably shouldn't mention his name, but he desperately wanted a new girlfriend because he'd been dumped. And so I wrote this poem. I'm a dog lover. I've had a dog until a year ago, and now I can't, unfortunately, because of my mobility problems. Anyway, I wrote this poem, and it's absolutely true. My dear friend is looking for a lover. She must be gentle, slim, available, intelligent, and a dog lover. He met such a woman. Delighted, was invited to her home for dinner. It grew late. They gelled. She asked him if he'd like to stay. Yes, please, he replied, knowing she only had one bed and a new one at that. Naked in each other's arms on the bed, passions rising, he glimpsed an object lift like a Harrier jet from the ground, hurtle towards them and land between them. The airborne dog collapsed the bed. All fell in a tangle, all passion gone. Dazed, the trio searched at each other in disbelief. The dog licked their faces apologetically, and they slept in celibacy on the floor. So, if you want to make love, don't have an enthusiastic dog in the bedroom with you. I wrote a poem that, in a sense, is autobiographical rather than relating a friend's loving disasters. This one's called My Lover's Noisy Bowels. There's thunder in the air. We're so close I sometimes don't know if it's me or she who makes these loud abdo noises, a great rush and a drain-like gurgle. We can't blame the dog always. He sleeps downstairs anyway. He dreams sometimes, scratches, but breaks wind with lethal silence. Now it's the equivalent to a dawn chorus, almost a religious experience in its sombre acoustic tune and accompaniment of sleep. Sometimes it's like a thunderstorm. I'm sure it's not me. People don't do things like that in Hove. She's never been the same since reading Chaucer. It's liberated her mind and her bowels, and like a born-again vegetarian she thunders through the night. It's odd, though, that I can still hear it when I'm alone. Perhaps it's the late-night cup of tea. I'm sure it's not me. Chaucer was obviously from Brighton. My Lover's Noisy Bowels. Now, what shall I do next? Yes, this poem is one that I wrote, I suppose, 15 or 20 years ago. I can't claim to be middle-aged any longer. It's called Middle Ages. Fathers and mothers are beginning to die, and middle age has crept on us. Even police inspectors begin to look young. Idealists have become reactionaries. Beauty's grown plump, invisible or wrinkled. Late beauty in some once unlined faces, stories mapped in a smile or frown lines. We grow weary of work, feel a need for family. Grandchildren surprise us with grand names. Wisdom's the province of the aged, but we're not old enough yet to be wise, or wise enough yet to be old. We cling to the innocence of the young, pretend the book still has many pages before it'll close. Middle age spreads like bindweed. We're amazed by its inevitability, insecure of an uncertain age, life paused, in between, neither young nor old, on the sharp edge of the fence. I've always tried to keep my inner child alive, and I suppose I've got a reputation for eccentricity because I revert to being about 10 years old, given the slightest chance. And I got people saying, aren't you concerned? And I said, no, I'm not. And I wrote this poem, Were They Watching? Right. Was anyone watching as I sat on the swing? Did they see me as danced by moonlight in the park? Could they guess at 50 I still like playgrounds? It's better now I'm supposed to be grown up. Nobody fusses that it might be dangerous hanging from the high bars by hands not used to hold me up. Did they laugh as I walked in the puddle, splashes up my legs? That exquisite liberation and deliberation as I enjoy the water, mud and sloshing squelch of Wellington boots full of water. Then I lean forward, knee bent, leg behind to let it run out, like from a teapot spout. I laugh at the slimy discomfort at wet stocking feet. Do they guess that I rush deliberately into piles of golden autumn leaves and whisk them with my feet, tidy them with the sides of my boots, satisfied with a high heap for the winds to lick, whilst wishing they would dry, that I might lie in them, a would-be babe in the woods? to listen to the gentle silence of the countryside and to my heart's beat? Can they guess the joy of burying legs in soft shingle on the beach, leaving just a toe to peep out, as though it wasn't mine to be an easy target for small stones? Do they remember how good it is to bounce a pebble on the waves, to beach comb, collect pretty stones? Have they never thought that they too are still children? The child in us lives on, still, small, but so quiet-voiced. So often she's frightened or lonely. She can't speak, but with beaches, puddles, leaves, mud, water and wind and woodlands, who can resist throwing her arms round an old tree, touched by its age and size, its new buds and life? Why don't judges, policemen, vicars and nuns and mums play in the park? Why do we feel self-conscious at our childlike joy in life and nature and give in to what's natural? The most self-imaged old cat still chases imagined mice in his dreams. My old dog still knows how to play with a stick. It's not done for grown-ups to be themselves, or even for many children. We're to be seen and not heard, to behave, to sit properly, to be good, to act our age. If people leapfrogged in Tesco's, wouldn't it be fun watching the till girl check our trolleys? But we'd be thought off our trolleys. As I stood in the snow licking an ice cream, who cares if they were still watching?